this is Gilbert Gottfried, and this is Gilbert Gottfried's amazing Colossal podcast with my co-host Frank Santopadre and our engineer Frank Verderosa. Our guest this week is a novelist, playwright, occasional producer, and greatly admired screenwriter and film director whose work includes some of the most memorable comedies of the last 50 years. He's written 4 novels: The Big Kiss-Off of 1944, Hollywood and Levine, Tender is Levine, and Sleepless Nights. He's also written for the stage, including the critically acclaimed Broadway play Social Security, which was directed by Mike Nichols, and the book for the Broadway musical version of his film Honeymoon in Vegas. Screenwriting credits include Soap Dish, Oh God, You Devil, The Scout, and the original Fletch, as well as classic comedy that Frank and I talk about frequently on this very podcast, The In-Laws. He's also directed the features Honeymoon in Vegas, So Fine It Could Happen to You, Striptease, Isn't She Great, and The Freshman, starring former podcast guest Matthew Broderick. And last but never least, he was one of the screenwriters of a movie based on his original story, which also happens to be one of the funniest movies ever committed to celluloid, the Mel Brooks-directed Blazing Saddles. In a career spanning 5 decades, he's worked with some of the entertainment industry's most notable performers, including Richard Pryor, Alan Arkin, Madeline Kahn, John Cleese, Anne Bancroft, James Caan, Bette Midler, Gene Wilder, Burt Reynolds, George Burns, and Marlon Brando. Please welcome to the podcast an artist of numerous talents and the man who gave the world the catchphrase Serpentine, the pride of Corona Queens, Andrew Bergman.
Sounds like it should be a fight introduction. Pride of Corona Queens. I should be coming in white trunks and 135 pounds.
Welcome, Andrew.
Nice to be here.
Thanks for doing this.
Now, the reason we wanted you on the show, and it's what all of our fans are demanding to know.
Why? Yeah.
You worked with Marlon Brando
I did.
and Richard Pryor. And so are you aware that Marlon Brando fucked Richard Pryor in the ass?
Why? You know the details of their sexual moment? I have no idea. First of all, obviously, I had no idea of any of this when I worked with either of them.
You heard Quincy Jones, though, say this.
I did hear that. I was quite taken by that.
But when you were working with Brando,
did he say, that night with Richie? No, he did not.
One time I fucked Richard Pryor in the ass. He never said that.
This is his idea of an icebreaker,
Yeah.
Andrew.
Well, listen. We're all grown-ups, right? We're adults. No, he didn't. It's quite a story, but I can't say anything that he would do would completely shock me.
No.
Either of them.
Yeah, because Quincy Jones said they were both coked up, and, you heard the whole thing. And Richard Pryor told you personally, Marlon Brando fucked me in the ass.
He never said that.
No.
Richard Donner was here. He worked with both of them, and he asked him the same question. But at least he waited till about 40 minutes into that one. Let him.
That's your icebreaker.
He let him loosen up. He let him get comfortable.
Rolls right off my back.
Yeah. But you do have some great Brando stories, things that actually did happen.
Yes.
Yeah. And we were talking about one outside when you and your producing partner flew to Tahiti to meet with him about The Freshman.
That was quite remarkable. You know, you want to hear this entire endless backstory? No.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, he had been an In-Laws fan, which I was aware of, because he called me out of the blue one day, and I thought it was a prank call, but it wasn't. It was him, and he was going to do a movie with Michael Jackson. Since we're now on the
that's timely too.
Perversions around the world.
Nice segue.
Yeah. So as long as we're in that arena. He was going to do a movie with Michael Jackson, which sounded like something that could never possibly happen. But I knew, so I said, well, that's interesting. But I knew he knew my work. So when I wrote The Freshman, we sent him a script and he read it like overnight, which was amazing.
And what was the story going to be with Brando and Michael Jackson?
One of them was going to play God and the other one was playing the devil.
Perfect.
I don't know who and what. And I called Scorsese. I said, is this thing really happening? He said, well, I'm not. You know, he sort of fummed for it. So I knew it was a non-starter. It was such a hopeless idea. And given the personalities, you knew it wasn't going to happen. So anyhow, he says, we should talk about, I sent him the script. He said, let's talk about it. I said, well, I'm going to fly out. I'll come to LA tomorrow. I said, no, let's meet in Tahiti. I'm going to be in Tahiti. Now, he really didn't like Tahiti that much, but it was this whole kind of Lord Jim, you know, this mystique. So we flew to Tahiti to meet with him, and he was enormous, and it was quite an amazing 5 days.
What was the thing that you were on the plane and you saw this large?
Well, that was the thing. We were flying in. You fly to Phuket, the capital, and then you take this puddle jumper the next morning to his own island. It's a gorgeous island. And we're flying in, and I see this, what appears to be a woman with blonde hair, but weighed 300 pounds. And my producing partner said, who the hell is that? I said, I think that's him. He dyed his hair for some movie he had done.
Unbelievable.
And it was just remarkable. For 4 days, we talked about everything but the movie. And then finally, we started talking about the movie.
Yeah. This I found fascinating too, Gilbert, and you'll love this. He loved old Jewish stand-ups.
Yeah. That's I found that was the secret. You know, he'd been sort of raised by the Adler family, Stella Adler. So he was into all this. He confessed he loved Jackie Mason. He loved
Borscht Belt.
Yeah, he loved the dumbest, shittiest.
Myron Cohen and all of those guys.
All of them.
Yeah.
You know.
That's great.
Morty Gunty. It was all right up his alley. I loved it. So I discovered it just.
Morty Gunty. Yeah. Marlon Brando's a Morty Gunty fan.
He had a weakness for
Norm Crosby.
those jokes.
Yeah. Jackie Vernon.
Jackie Vernon. God.
We bring him up on this show.
Yeah.
That's great. And he tested you by asking you what your favorite comedy was?
He's not naturally a comic presence on screen, and I wanted to keep him sort of loosey-goosey. And I had told him this joke at some point, the two guys who cross Collins Avenue, Abe and Sol, and Abe gets hit by a car, and Sol says, are you comfortable? And Abe says, I make a living. He loved that. He thought it was the funniest thing. So we'd be working, and he'd say, what was that one again? The two gentlemen, they're crossing the street, and what are they? I said, I give him the joke, and he'd start laughing, he'd go do the take. The other thing, I had this habit of eating bazooka bubblegum when I was shooting as a nervous habit. And he said, what are you chewing? I said, bazooka bubblegum. He said, can I have one? I said, this is how you direct the greatest actor in the world. I said, if I get a great take, I'm giving you a piece of gum. It's like Ed Sullivan with a chimp on a motorcycle, So he does his take. Of course, he nails it. He walks over with his hand outstretched. I give him
Fantastic.
Unbelievable.
Oh, it's rewarding and
rewarding it, absolutely.
Yes.
What was the thing about the calls, the phone calls, that you had to work out a code?
Yes. Well, Marlon had like 9 phones in his house, none of which he ever answered. He would take messages on one of them. He said, well, how are we going to communicate? He said, well, I have to give you a code. If it was dealing with the CIA dealing with Marlon. He said, what kind of sandwich do you like? I said, well, tuna fish. I said, all right, if you want to leave a message, say, it's tuna fish 1. You want to return tuna fish 2. If it's very important, tuna fish 3. And if it's life-threatening, tuna fish 4, but never use tuna fish 4. I said
It's like DEFCON.
DEFCON, absolutely. This is like nuclear attack. So I said, I hope I never get to 3. Frank. So I'm up in the Berkshires, summering, and I let a couple of weeks pass because I know what he's doing. He's showing the script to people he knows and getting there, kibitzing with them. So I wait a week and I leave him a tuna fish. That's it, leave it, and then walk away. 2 weeks later, a week later, tuna fish 2. Now I start going by decimals. I leave him a tuna fish 2.2 because I didn't want to get to 3. A tuna fish 2.8. Then he calls me. He said, well, we should really get together and talk. I said, fine. And that's when he said, let's come to Tahiti.
Yeah, it's great.
Bananas.
At what point did he say, I have to play this like Don Corleone because they're only going to accept me as...
Yeah, when we were in Tahiti, he said, I can't play just a gumba. I can't play another guy.
Right.
They expect...
Of course.
I didn't really think they did, but hell, to get him in the movie, I said, fine.
Of course.
So I had to figure out how could I do some non-libelous way to have him appropriate that character. So I thought, well, you're the real guy. You're the one they based Don Corleone on. And that's how he said that works for everybody.
I love that.
And he hated Tahiti?
He didn't like it that much.
What, he was making Mutiny on the Bounty or something, and he bought a bunch of those islands for Trump change? $250,000.
And it's beautiful place.
Wow.
But he liked the feeling of...
He liked being Marlon Brando in Tahiti.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that was the thing of it. I mean, I think basically he was sort of bored shitless there, But he liked, and he knew everything about it. He knew everything about it. The ornithology,
Well, he was a learned guy. I mean, he was a guy who was interested in everything.
Well, here's the thing. He knew if he picked up the phone, he'd get anybody in the world to talk to him. He's Marlon Brando.
Sure.
So he would, if he was interested in something, he would call like the expert at UCLA.
Wow.
Mr. Brando, I'd like to have dinner at his house to discuss, migrations of seabirds. And they'd show up and get the 5 smartest people in the world, and he'd pick their brains.
Imagine having that access.
King of the world.
Yeah.
Now, did he also, I heard, especially later in his career, he would just do things to fuck with movie makers just because he could.
Oh, he always did. He would torture producers mercilessly. He once, he called Mike LaBelle, the producer of the movie, and it sounded like he was in an airplane. And he told Mike that he was actually flying to Tahiti for the weekend. He borrowed Frank Sinatra's plane, but he'll be back Monday. And the producer, of course, had a breakdown. Because if this guy leaves, what are the odds?
Never come
back only halfway through the picture. But he just was in his hotel in Toronto, working these machines that made it sound like he was in some pressurized cabin.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Want to come back? We'll come back to the freshman too, because there's a lot to unpack there. But I want to just go back because there's a connection here, and asking you about growing up in Queens. We like to get local boys on the show. Gilbert's very excited when we have a Jewish guest, by the way.
Are you?
Aren't you, Gil?
They're so rare in New York.
Yeah, and they're so rare in show business.
He keeps a tally.
Jews in show business.
Yeah.
He keeps. But you grew up in Queens.
I did.
In Corona. Yeah.
Darkest Queens.
Playing stickball in the street.
All that.
And I found this fascinating. I didn't know this about you, and all the times I saw you interviewed, that your dad wrote gags for Victor Borge. My
parents were German refugees. My father really had always wanted to be in the movie business. In fact, he worked for Universal Pictures in Berlin. The guy who founded Universal, Carl Laemmle.
Uncle Carl.
Oh, yeah.
Uncle Carl was from his hometown.
No
and in
kidding.
fact, Laemmle wrote the affidavit that got my father out of Germany, which he did for a lot of people.
Oh, shit. That's great history.
Yeah.
Wow.
He did that for a lot of people. He got a lot of people out, Laemmle. He really did. So he was, he never got a chance to do it. He came over in 1937 when it was not an optimum time to find a job. He sold Fuller brushes, and then he went to work for the Daily News, translating German broadcasts shortwave for the news desk. And he segued from there into the radio TV department, and he wrote radio and TV, reviews and things. And then he started writing gags on the side, and he wrote for Borga.
Right.
Yeah.
He wanted to be a comedy writer, or he just wanted to be a writer?
A writer, but he was a very funny man.
Yeah. Now, I know you were watching Bob and Ray, and you were watching all this stuff, and Gene Shepard, you were a fan of.
Bob and Ray my father also worked with Bob and Ray, who
fantastic.
I used to watch them work.
Oh.
My father worked for CBS Radio as a flack for a while, and they had a 15-minute show every night. He said, let's go. We sat in the control room and watch as with the sound effects guy and the whole thing.
That's great.
So great.
Old radio.
Beyond great. And they have a note in front of them. They just knocked the stuff off. And it was so paralyzing. They were so funny. God, were they funny.
So he was introducing you to this stuff directly.
And Kovacs. He was first critic in New York to write about Kovacs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Your dad's name was Rudy?
Rudy Bergman.
Rudy Bergman.
Looking and Listening with Rudy Bergman.
Wow.
Daily News.
Wow.
So what was your first job in show business?
My first job in show business, I got a PhD in American history, and I wrote this book.
That's right here. We're in the money. Depression America and its films. Fascinating read.
And I couldn't get a teaching job because there were like 10 million PhDs at that point because everybody had gone to graduate school to avoid going to Vietnam. That was your choice. So I got a job as a flack at United Artists for a year because my father knew various PR guys around town. And that was a fascinating job. I met Fellini and Truffaut and all these amazing people.
You replaced Jonathan Demme?
I replaced Jonathan Demme. Who was
interesting
similarly
too.
qualified to be a flack as I was.
Wow.
two,
Yeah.
no good nicks. So while I was doing that, I was writing this novella about a black sheriff in the Old West.
Yeah, we had Norman here, as you know, and we talked a little bit about the genesis of Blazing Saddles. Now, this could be bullshit, or I got bad information. Did it somehow start with a poster of Jimi Hendrix on a horse?
That was one thing. It's not. He was not wrong.
Okay.
I had an idea I was in graduate school at Wisconsin, Madison in the 60s, which was bananas in those days. And I loved Westerns. I remember seeing The Wild Bunch out there. I said, whoa, that's a movie. And there was a poster of Hendrix on a horse.
I think I know that poster.
It was a very famous poster. And I said, now there's something there. And I remember writing a letter to a friend of mine. I just had this idea of a town waiting for the new sheriff to show up in 1850. And it's Jimi Hendrix. What would that be?
Right.
And that was the little pearl in the oyster's belly. And that's what the idea.
And did it morph into he might be more radicalized? He might be like an H. Rap Brown kind of character, or Huey Newton.
The way things happen when you start writing something,
right?
At least any good that I've written, it just takes off.
Just a germ of an idea.
You let him take you someplace.
And who were some of the actors they originally wanted?
Well, there's only one actually, because Alan Arkin was going to direct the original My Tex-Ex. I wrote a first draft.
Was it a treatment now or a full screenplay at this point?
First, there was this novella.
A novella?
Nobody knew who the hell I was. I was going to write a treatment. I didn't even know how to write a treatment.
Right.
I didn't know how to write a script.
Right.
So I wrote this 90-page story, which was very flashy. It was a good story. I still have it. And I sold it to Warner Brothers. And they commissioned a first draft, which I wrote, with like the margins out to here. I didn't know the form of anything. And they hired Arkin to direct it. And he went after James Earl Jones, and they realized that wasn't going to work because James Earl Jones was not really a comic presence.
Far from.
So that fell apart, and then they called me and said, "What do you think of Mel Brooks?" I said, "Well, 2,000-year-old man was my Bible in college. Who's funnier?" I said, "Let's give it a shot."
And you were 26, so how are you going to resist
I'm going to say,
idea of Mel Brooks?
No, I can't do that.
Right.
But they tried out a bunch of actors, or one actor, a few actors for the Gene Wilder part.
Yeah, that was later.
That was a really big.
Yeah.
Once we started, the guy we really wanted was Johnny Carson. We sent the script to Johnny Carson. Well, that would be amazing.
Wow, the Waco Kid, Johnny Carson.
The Waco Kid, Johnny Carson. It was like stunt casting, but and he read it, and we were like waiting by the phone. It's like 3 Jews sitting by a phone waiting. It's like a date. And finally said, I can't do this. I can't be I'm Johnny. I just can't do this.
Yeah.
So we were crushed. So then we hired
you go for Dan Daly?
Dan Daly, and that fell through. And then he hired Gig Young. Gig Young is hired to play the Waco Kid. And the first day of shooting, he collapses in an alcoholic coma. He was a serious drinker. And that's the first day of shooting of Blazing Saddles. This Gig Young collapsed on the floor. That was an auspicious beginning.
Yeah.
And then they said that Brooks thought, what a great performance.
Yeah, he thought, Hell said, wow, this guy's amazing. Until they realized he really was passing out. So awful. So then he went to Gene,
right, of course,
from the producers, and begged him. And Gene said, I'll do it if you make this movie I'm interested in doing, which was Young Frankenstein.
Wow.
So that's how that transaction began.
And of course now you watch the film and you can't think of anybody else.
Because we thought, there's going to be an older guy, and Gene was probably 35 at the time, but he was great.
Well, perfect
and
drunk.
You really believe those two guys loved each other, which was the key to the success of that movie, I think.
And from making so many movies and from going down this road so many times, the serendipity is always
it's insane.
I mean, you have Richard Pryor actually is being courted to play the sheriff.
Yeah, but Warner's wasn't going to
go for that. So you wind up with Cleavon Little, which is a beautiful.
Who was my original idea when I wrote the story.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
The first person who read even the treatment was Cleavon Little, whose manager said, we're not interested. Of course, he never saw it.
Right. But you wind up with Cleavon Little and Gene Wilder, and it's perfect.
Yeah.
But it's so funny to think that then later on, Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor would be this big movie comedy team.
Go and no, as they say.
Yeah.
But
they said too, I mean, one of the things that scared them, of many things about Pryor, was how that he disappeared one time.
Well, he would show up to write, or sometimes he wouldn't show up to write. It was Richie. But he was so funny and so brilliant. But no studio was going to take a gamble on him at that point.
They said he was, at one point he called from another state.
Detroit.
Yeah.
He said he was in Detroit.
That's possible.
Yeah. Was the producer Michael Hertzberg? Said, where are you, Richard? And he said, I'm in Detroit. I followed some girls. Norman told us how the sort of the room changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that writer's room had to be.
That was a fun room.
Yeah. You said it was like a Marx Brothers movie at certain points.
I said that?
Yeah. With Richard in there.
Well, Richard was
and Norman and Mel throwing things off.
I always say it's like sort of, I'd never worked with anybody. I'd never written a script. And I always say it's like playing tennis, and they say there's 3 guys warming up, and it's,
right.
Lendl and Borg and Connors, and why don't you go hit with them and see what happens?
Was it competitive too?
You know what? It was just all for one and one for all. It wasn't really people trying to, no, that's no good. It was just, it's like that game of telephone when people say, who wrote that one? Some lines I absolutely remember, but they when you go around a room, it just gets transmogrified over and over and over again, and suddenly, that's it. The right one comes out.
Yeah, Norman's cagey about it too. He either doesn't remember who wrote what, or he just.
It's not really cagey. It's like literally
group credit.
Yeah, it really was. It really worked that way.
Yeah.
And I heard that Pryor would sit across from Mel Brooks and be like pouring cocaine.
That was the first day.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That was the icebreaker. Well, it's a little early. 11 o'clock is a little early for cocaine. And we're in the conference room at Warner Brothers, 666 Fifth Avenue. Generally, he stuck to Courvoisier. He didn't do that much coke.
Is this BS too, or was Dick Gregory approached by Mel at a certain point to see if he was interested in coming on board before Pryor? I found that in an article. I thought it didn't ring true. It's interesting. The deeper you go into this research, the more you find stuff.
There's always a great amount of mythology.
There's mythology attached to it. And you guys turned in, what, a 400-page draft?
No.
Also bullshit. Yeah.
It was like 150 pages. It was long.
Okay.
know,
Yeah.
but double spaced. It wasn't unwieldy. But there were some great bits that we lost along the way.
Do you have the original?
Oh, sure.
Oh, God. And you haven't shown anybody except for maybe some writer friends.
Mel wanted to play a guy named, based on Humphrey Bogart. We're going to have a cowpoke named Bogey who would only talk about where the strawberries. Now, you had 4 quarts of strawberries. There were 3. Yeah, so this came. Now there's 2 pints left. Every time you cut to the...
Yeah. Because in the documentary about Blazing Saddles, there's 2 scenes with him that were cut.
Yeah.
Yeah. With Governor Lepetamain, which is also an inside joke.
Yes.
Yes.
And when the movie came out, they called Harvey Korman Hedley Lamar.
Hedley Lamar.
Yeah.
And she sued.
Yeah. Hedley Lamar sued.
Which is all extra weird because it's a joke.
Fine with us.
There's a joke in the movie about her suing.
Yes.
Yeah, they said this is
1874.
So we could sue her.
Yeah.
So, and what happened with the Hedley Lamar?
The lawsuit was dismissed as a frivolous, ridiculous exercise.
But didn't Mel Brooks say, pay her already?
Did he?
In an interview, in the documentary, the same documentary I think we both watched, Gil, he's saying, she's Hedley Lamar, give her some money.
Oh, maybe he did.
That cast, and the more you watch it, there's,
Harvey was unbelievable.
Oh, my God.
Yes.
And she and
the 2 of them.
Madeline was extraordinary.
The 2 of them.
And Slim Pickens was stupendous.
Every bit part. And Burton, who you brought
Gilliam.
back in Honeymoon in Vegas.
Right.
George Firth, David Huddleston,
That was a wild cast.
John Hillerman, every part is so perfect. And everybody has their little star turn. Everybody has great moments.
Well, that's what
Alex
I learned.
Karras even.
That's what I learned, is you give everybody, some choice dish to eat, And I tried to do that in all my movies after that, that you don't just throw people away. You give them something that they can be remembered for in a movie.
Well, we're talking about it outside, our obsession with character actors, our shared obsession.
And I also, in the movie, how, like the climax... They escape from the studio where Blazing Saddles is and just go all over the place.
Break the wall.
Yeah.
That's Kovacs. That was the kind of thing you didn't see in feature films.
No, that was really quite something, and that I credit Mel for, because we had a more conventional ending, and he said this movie needs something more nuts at the end.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So this movie opens. You guys think the whole time you're writing it, this is a joke between us.
Well, Warner Brothers thought it was a joke between them. They thought it was just going to die within minutes.
They did.
Upon release. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but you guys shared that. You guys thought, this is for us. Nobody's ever going to see this.
Yeah, but that's the lesson you learn.
Yeah.
Write for yourself and see what happens.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, like back then, the bean eating scene was hysterically funny. Now it seems like you can't make a comedy without fart sounds in them.
So it's not funny anymore.
Yeah.
It's not bold anymore. And it's not authentic. He was
nobody had ever seen
Yes.
anything like that.
Of course.
And is it true that they just recorded guys with their hand under their elbows for the fart?
This I don't know. I do know that Mel said the sound guys were saying, these are too loud. And Mel said, believe me, after the first one, you're not going to hear anything after this.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want. And it was true.
Yeah.
It was people going so bananas. It was like pantomime.
Yeah. But it's also clearly made by guys with a great affection for Westerns.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, yeah. It's an homage as well as a satire.
Well, what it really was when you're a kid and you go to the movies and you talk back to the screen. Yeah. We did the talking back in the movie,
So you're 26 in the writer's room. I guess you're 26, 27 when the movie opens, and now you're a screenwriter.
Yeah.
Now you're a Hollywood screenwriter. Was your dad around to see all this
no, he was
success?
Dead. He was dead by then.
I'm sorry.
That was a heartbreak. And I remember when we went out to L.A. to do a rewrite and do the casting, and I knew how much what that would have meant to him. I must have, when I drove onto that lot, I cried.
Oh boy, I'll bet. So now, how do we get from Blazing Saddles to the next project?
The next project was a movie I wrote called Rhapsody in Crime, which was a great
which I want to read. Cagney, John Garfield.
It was all the 30s movies wrapped up in one. It was a concert pianist who was a gangster who was a great concert pianist. It was a prison movie. It was all of those movies.
I'm a fugitive from a chain gang. It was your tribute to all of them.
Every one of them rolled up into one. It ended with the hero playing the Tchaikovsky piano concerto on the roof of Carnegie Hall in a big shootout. And it's sort of like a white heat ending. It's just everything just explodes.
Fantastic.
It was great, and Warner Brothers paid a fortune for it. I didn't have a real producer for it, so it never happened.
Rhapsody in Crime.
Rhapsody in Crime.
I saw you at Film Forum, and you were saying that movie today would cost about $600 million.
Anything you wanted, Blazing Saddles would have cost a fortune. Just,
And Mel Brooks has said quite a number of times that Blazing Saddles could not be made today.
No, there's no chance.
So many reasons.
For a million, list them alphabetically.
Yeah.
Starting with the fact that it's an original screenplay.
Oh, yeah.
That already dooms it.
Yeah.
And, it's at real locations. Every movie now is out of a computer box. So nothing really, you can't relate to it in a real way anymore. Actors look like cockroaches, like crawling over a mountain. It's just not, it wouldn't happen.
People would misunderstand it today. They would misinterpret it. And by the way, I saw it with an audience, and Mel was showing it at Radio City last year. And I took my wife, and I thought, can an audience actually handle this?
They still can. Right?
Still can. It's fine. Everybody mostly.
Well, because you know already. You know what it is.
Yeah, yeah. But very, very brave filmmaking. So you get a phone call about Rhapsody in Crime that you're not.
The good news was bad
call.
news. The good news, bad news call. Bad news is we're not making Rhapsody in Crime. The good news, we want you to write the sequel to Freebie and the Bean. I said, I'm not sure that's the good. Tell me again what the good news is.
Did you know this, Gilbert?
Yes.
He said, well, it's not really a sequel to Freebie and the Bean, but Alan Arkin and Peter Falk want to do a movie together. I said, well, that's interesting.
Right.
And they struck me as, didn't they make a movie? That was my first thought. Because it seemed like such a natural pairing of opposites. So Alan and I started. Alan was the executive producer, so we started meeting and discover how can we find a movie where they could play to their strengths. The strengths being that Peter would drive Alan nuts for 2 hours. That's the only plot I could imagine.
Right.
Because their personalities. One is a hysteric and one is a turtle. You know.
Right.
So I at some point I said, how about their in-laws? That's the only way I could think of that they'd be absolutely glued together and they couldn't get out of it. And then it really wrote itself. I mean, that script was like 140 pages and it just kept going and going. It was because there was no plot.
Right.
The whole plot was complete.
What's a MacGuffin?
Yeah,
it was plates,
a moving target.
Engraving plates.
And I heard it didn't change that much in the making from the original script.
I mean, I have to say that script was like perfect. That was my 27 up, 27 down. That was the script. It just worked. And because it was written for it was like fitting two suits.
Sure.
Those guys were so specific.
And somebody said that when Arkin first pitched it, his idea was, I want to be in a movie with Peter Falk where he does stuff and I'm annoyed by it.
Well, that was it. That's it. There's no other. That's the whole movie.
It's also a trailblazer in a way because the buddy comedy wasn't really a thing yet. There weren't the way it became. The way they just started cranking them out in the 80s.
Yeah, no, it was a joy, and it was one of those things that just everything sort of fell together. And also talk about great other people, Ed Begley and
everybody,
and Libertini was hysterical in the movie.
Yeah. Oh God.
And did you see the Michael Douglas Albert Brooks?
I did.
Yeah.
And I got the best reviews I ever got in my entire life when that movie came out. I ran to Larry David. He said, "What do you think?" I said, "It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Can't compare. Work of genius. And Alan felt the same way.
Yeah, I heard he was getting phone calls.
Peter called him when the reviews came out. They were celebrating, because the whole point of the reviews was how could they transgress on this masterpiece? And even critics who crapped on our movie was like, how could they?
Right. Tell us about writing the dinner scene and how you could have gone on and on.
Well, the dinner scene originally was like 35 pages long. I realized that couldn't be that long. But once you get into that rhythm of somebody bullshitting insanely.
So good.
In that voice, in that droning, ridiculous voice, I hated to stop writing it.
Oh, it was an incredible sight. Peasants screaming, chasing these flies down the road, waving brooms. You can imagine the pathetic quality of this, waving these crudely fashioned brooms at these enormous flies as they carry their children off to almost certain death.
Oh, that is just the most horrible thing.
You sure these are flies you're talking about?
Flies. Natives had a name for them. Jose Grecos de Muertos.
Oh.
Flamenco dancers of death.
You took those slides of them that never came out, remember?
Oh, that's a shame. I really would have liked to have seen those slides.
Me too.
Yeah, I left them in a jacket that got modernized. I tell you, it broke my heart because those slides would have won me a Pulitzer Prize. The enormous flies flapping slowly away into the sunset. Small brown babies clutched in their beaks.
Wow.
Beaks. Flies with beaks.
Sight I'll never forget.
The tsetse
That
flies.
was with-
tsetse
the
flies.
tsetse flies carrying
the
little
funniest thing
babies.
ever.
Jose Grecos de Muertos. When I wrote that, I said, God just gave me that line. Jose Grecos de Muertos.
great.
Flamenco dancers of death.
So is when Arkin says there's red tape in the bush.
There's red tape. Well, bush. The word bush, I don't have to tell you, it's gold because every time you say it, it's such a ridiculous word.
He's so perfect,
Yeah.
and he's got almost the beginning of a smirk on his face, like he looks like he's about to crack up through the whole movie.
He is the master
Oh, my God.
of playing to this thing that's a foot and a half from his face.
Because I remember so much of it was just Arkin repeating what folks said.
Yes.
Like saying, flies? These were flies?
Flies with beaks?
Flies with beaks.
These are flies you're talking about?
But I found it comforting too, and you just mentioned it, that you didn't understand the story yourself. Because
There was nothing to understand.
he's basically a CIA guy,
Or
and
isn't he?
Or isn't he?
And I went through when I wrote it, to me, I could have ended the movie with, like Streetcar Named Desire, with three guys in white outfits putting Peter into a wagon and driving him away. And it would have been a completely credible ending.
I've also heard you say that when you're writing, there's a great pleasure in writing in a room by yourself and cracking yourself up.
There is.
Yeah. And when you came up with a dictator with a Senior Wences fetish, you must have been.
It's just, oh, that's good.
Yeah. And the right guy to play it.
You know who I originally wanted? This is good. Before Libertini entered the scene. When I saw the Wild Bunch, there was this guy who played General Mapache.
I know who you mean.
Vicious guy. I said, that's my guy. And Hiller told me that he was in prison for double homicide.
Oh.
I guess he would have been good then. So that's when they got to Libertini, who was fantastic.
And he had history. He's a Second City guy, and
Yes,
Alan was a
yes,
Second City. So
absolutely.
they must have had
Absolutely.
They must have had shared history.
They did.
And he tried to break Alan up. Alan says on the DVD commentary, he kept trying to destroy me. He kept trying to make me laugh.
Well, the scene when he's pouring water into his hand,
Beyond
that was almost impossible for anybody in that room not to break up.
And how did the serpentine scene come about?
I wrote a scene called I said Serpentine. Peter says Serpentine. Now, what happened after that is due to Alan's genius in physical comedy, because he runs so funny.
Yeah.
And then that he would run and then run back into danger the same way. That was the perversity.
really wonderful.
It was heaven.
I'm going to make Gilbert tell you a quick story. David Steinberg was directing Gilbert in a
Right.
was it a feature?
Oh,
Or
in
Mad
a
About You?
TV Mad About
Episode
You.
of Mad About You. Tell Andrew will enjoy the direction he gave you.
Well, I was supposed to say something to Reiser and then run off. And, Steinberg says, cut. I want you, could you run a little more
That's a good one. That's a good Steinberg.
I need you to run more gracefully. And I said, I don't know, gracefully? And he said, well, not gracefully, but more faster. And I said, I could run a little fast. And he goes, no, not really faster, but not so choppy. And then there's a long pause. And he just throws his arms in the air and he goes, can you run less Jewish? And I knew immediately.
Yeah.
You have to stand a little straighter.
Yeah.
Yes.
Alan's running in the Serpentine is a little Jewish.
Yes.
But that came from your life. The Serpentine thing. There was an origin of the phrase.
Yes, it was a phrase. When we used to play football in college, a friend of mine, a hilarious, unfortunately now deceased friend of mine, we'd play 3-on-3 football, and we'd huddle. Even if it was just 3 people, you huddle.
Yeah.
And he'd say Serpentine out from the huddle. Now there's 3 people. It's one thing you have 11 guys going like this, but 3 Jews going like this. I never forgot this. That Serpentine out from a huddle, and that's what the Serpentine. And it's such a ridiculous word.
My wife had not seen The In-Laws. Shame on her. I showed it to her Saturday night, and she says, "Oh, that's what Serpentine means." And she says, there's a show called Gilmore Girls that she loves, and there's a Serpentine gag in Gilmore Girls, which is an In-Laws homage, an homage.
And there are lines in the movie that have nothing to do with what's going on in the movie.
Well, that's to me, that's the best comedy. I've never written a joke in my life. What's funny is when. Is that funny? If it's funny in the situation, then it's hysterical.
Yeah. Well, when Falk's saying break up some croutons in the soup because it looks a little greasy.
Yeah,
May I try it? All of that. The Price is Right stuff. It's gold.
And he has a line in a diner like, "Is this freeze-dried?"
Yes.
Right.
Very good.
Very good. Very good.
Those throwaways.
The CIA stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the
The
chicken.
trick is not to get killed. That's the key to the benefit program.
Yeah.
And I think it's talking about a chicken sandwich.
Yes. Well, that was its one ad lib.
Yeah.
That was an ad lib because they had these great chicken sandwiches. We were shooting in Cuernavaca, and Peter starts telling Alan while they're waiting for action. They make a chicken sandwich and
a grande.
And Alan says, "Say that when we go into action. Say that." He said, "What do you mean? Say it. That's great."
And
so he did.
I remember in the middle of it, Falk goes, "Do you take chicken shell?"
There's so much good stuff in there. I mean, it has to be gratifying. So many years later, this thing you came up with in the privacy of your
it's unbelievable.
Your home.
It's beyond gratifying, and to all of us, it's
traveled the world.
When the movie was named to these Criterion Classics,
yes.
What
an honor!
It was better. Alan said, he called me that morning. He said, "This is better than an Oscar." It's just you feel, the Seventh Seal.
Yeah.
Wild Strawberries.
Bergman and Bergman.
Half. And he lost. But it's less, and I don't know how many people have told me they saw it the night before their wedding, which is really gratifying. Or it's a movie they remember watching with their father because their father loved it, and they introduced them to it. That just kills you. That's just so. That's why you do it in the first place.
Yeah.
We're all trying to cheat death. So that's why we do it in the first place.
I have to tell our listeners too, if you haven't seen it, shame on you. See it immediately, but also take time to listen to the DVD commentary because there's such gratitude. The four of you are at different stages of your life and your career.
It was a miracle to all of us.
Yeah.
that you shared this
a sweetness between all of you.
Absolutely.
Now,
that's nice. It's a great piece of work.
Then you did a sequel. Well, not a sequel, but brought them together.
Yeah, that was a disaster.
Yeah.
Well, I had no last act. And if you don't have a last act, you have nothing.
Kind of a takeoff on Strangers on a Train.
It was Double Indemnity.
Double Indemnity, I mean.
Yeah.
And I had a great half hour, and it crumbled.
I want to ask about So Fine, and specifically working with somebody Gilbert worked with and we love on this show, Jack Warden.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're talking about character actors outside, and you
Terrific.
can't think of a better one.
What a guy.
Yeah.
The
It's so
funniest-
funny in that movie.
He's so funny. He's just, his face.
Yeah.
You know, Beatty used him all the time because he's just.
Sure. Sidney Lumet
nobody-
used him all the time.
Nobody does that. He told the greatest, you talk about Lon Chaney. I mean, nobody had better showbiz stories than Warden.
I'll bet.
That he did a studio one with Lon Chaney Jr., in which they went on the air, and Lon Chaney Jr. was under the, and this was TV, was under the impression there was a dress rehearsal.
Oh, I know.
Oh, it's a
this
famous
one.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when we really do it, I'm going to pick up the chair. The guy, no, we're doing it now.
Right.
Later, when we really do it, he kept saying, when we really do it. You know?
Yeah, that was in Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was supposed to destroy the whole laboratory. And instead, he thought it was a dress rehearsal, and he would pick up a chair and place it down, and pick up another thing and place it down.
Gilbert has an autograph from Lon Chaney Jr. that he sent him when he was a boy, which is one of his prized
Really?
possessions.
Yeah,
he still has
I
it.
heard he was sick, and they gave an address, and I got a
great.
little thing of the Wolfman, a
Yeah.
postcard of
Yeah.
the Wolf.
No, Jack Warden was a gem.
Yeah. But
And such a great guy to have just have around, you know.
was that James Hong? Was he one of the guys hitting Richard Keel with the palm fronds? And
Yes,
the,
well, I had James Hong in the
oh, by the way, just
in
to
the
go back.
In-Laws, you know, Billy and Bing, those two guys.
That is another great.
Yeah.
The
Well,
karate
James
chop.
Hong's
Look on Arkin's face when he hits him with the karate chop. And he keeps showing him just like the little moments. Like
Yeah.
he keeps showing him what he's reading in Better
Right.
Homes and Gardens.
Right.
Like he's so interested. What about working with Ennio Morricone on So
That was
Fine?
amazing. He was a lovely guy. Fabulous.
You did not.
No, and we did it. There was some musician strikes. We had to do all the music in Rome, which wasn't so terrible either.
I was going to say you didn't skimp on the talent.
No.
Santo Loquasto
No.
and
That was Santo's first movie.
and Morricone. Really?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a little like an Italian sex comedy, like a
You know what?
like a
You know what?
Decca
It was an
movie.
Italian section.
Right.
I mean, that was my
Meaning to ask
aim.
you
The
that.
music, everything. Was,
Right.
was
Yeah.
the doors slamming and the whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so almost like something out of Golden Naples or one of those pictures that Decca used to make.
That was the aim.
Yeah.
Very astute of you.
Well, I'm a bit of a film nerd. Also, the last scene borrows or an homage
Yeah.
from Night of the Opera.
Oh, totally. I've borrowed from that a couple of times.
Yeah, it's a good place to
In
borrow.
The Freshman, I borrowed from
Oh, the,
it
with
also.
the Laspari.
Rodolfo Laspari.
And So Fine.
Yes.
It ends with
That's
an
it,
opera.
that-
yeah.
And also
With
the
a cello.
backdrops
Right.
are
Yes,
flying
yes.
down, and Warden is riding a sandbag like Harpo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Steal from the best, or pay tribute to the
Absolutely.
best. Yeah.
I raised my kids on Night at the Opera, you know.
Let's talk about that because it's interesting. We've talked to a lot of guests about the Marx Brothers. We have Bill Marx is going to come and do a show
yeah?
in a couple of weeks with us, Harpo's son. But we are Paramount purists, Gilbert and
Oh,
I.
yeah.
We don't so much care as much for the Thalberg.
Yeah.
Well, because the music is so awful.
I thought.
But Night at the Opera is hysterical.
But I
it's got
thought
great
Night at the
stuff.
Opera just struck me as the beginning of the end.
Well, because the Duck Soup was a total bomb.
Yeah.
So they said, we got it, you know.
Because, I don't know, Night at the Opera, it seems like they're under control. And I didn't want them under control.
Well, I did a whole chapter in this, We Were in the Money,
You did.
about that very thing. It was called Anarcho-Nihilist Laugh Riots. And what I did, I traced the Marx Brothers of consequence that Groucho runs a university, and then he's a president.
yes.
And that when that bombed, then that's it. He can't have any power anymore.
Right.
So the next movie, he's a flea bag opera impresario, and he never had a position of authority again.
Because
They couldn't accept it.
Right.
what I love with Duck Soup is another film where it doesn't make sense from one scene to the next. In mid scene, he's prosecuting Chico, and then he defends him, just because it's a funny joke.
Well, what has two floppy ears and weighs 400 pounds? That's irrelevant. That's irrelevant.
But you make the argument in your book, which I'll again recommend to our listeners too, because a lot of our listeners are crazy film buffs.
Well, then they should read We're in the Money immediately.
Yeah, We're in the Money, Andrew's book, Depression in America and Its Films, which also happens to be, as he said, his PhD dissertation. But you make the argument that the timing, that there's a historical context for why Duck Soup, because it happened one night, which came out the same year, 34, which you compare it to, there was a completely different attitude.
Well, it was about healing.
Yes.
You know, the early before Roosevelt,
Yeah.
you really could have like explosive comedy in which you really didn't know how things were going to come out. Once everybody thought FDR was going to solve everything, then all movies were, all classes loved each other. I mean,
Right.
you really had some class consciousness before 33. Afterward, it was just rich people loving poor people and everybody. That was the Capra thing.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it really is.
And yeah, because we like the anarchy of Duck Soup, and I guess Thalberg felt
Too scary.
yeah,
and
too
the
scary.
pure insanity that it makes no sense. They're not trying to defend anything. It's no reason for what they're doing.
No, it's anarchistic and
You called it in the book the most fully orchestrated attack on the state
Well,
to
it
ever
is.
reach the American screen.
It is.
Which is, I think, one of the reasons I love it so much.
And now you, Frank, you was telling me, what, Problem Child and what movie?
The Freshman. Yeah, when The Freshman came out, it was was it Presumed Innocent?
Yeah, we were in a great spot. We're between Presumed Innocent, which took everybody over 40, and Problem Child was already under 40, leaving us about 800 people between the ages of 19 and 26.
Yeah. Well, he'll forgive you. Well, did Problem Child do better than?
It did great. We'd opened originally like 10 screens in New York and did unbelievable businesses. Let's grow it. We're gonna 1,200 theaters, and then we just. But thank God for cable and all of that. The movie's had a great life since then.
Oh, it's great. And again, as you mentioned before, another Marx Brothers reference.
Yeah,
which
Laspari,
did not escape me.
Yes,
You-
Matthew's passport.
Yeah, you threw them in where you could. Where did the idea of the of Burt Park singing to the Komodo dragon? Another one of these.
God
Pure inspiration.
God presented that to me.
That must be just like one of the
It
great
was heaven.
great days of your life.
First, it was the great. Yeah. First of all, just to get, and when I told Marlon that Burt Park's in the movie, he was like, so great. He
Hilarious.
just loved it.
Hilarious.
And then the guy who did the music for us was a guy named Don Was, who later went on doing all
sure.
the Bonnie Raitt's albums, a great producer.
Was
Was he the one with Walk the Dinosaur?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did he wind up working with Brian Wilson?
Don and David was not was. And he was close to Dylan. And he played Maggie's Farm for Dylan, and Dylan flipped. He thought it was great. And I said, now, is there any chance?
Oh, my God.
My dream already was to get Marlon and Burt Parks in the same shot. That was already a fulfillment of a dream, which I did. I said, you think Dylan would sit in on this just for a chorus? Then I get the three of them in one shot. But he didn't do it.
Yeah. Not many movies have Burt Parks and Maximilian Schell
Max
in
was
them,
great.
and Bruno Kirby.
Yeah.
You said you liked Maximilian Schell.
I did. I got along great with him. Well, my parents were German. I completely understood his perversity.
A great actor. And another guy, I think if you went down his IMDb page, you wouldn't find a lot of comedies.
No, but he was unlike Marlon, he genuinely was a funny guy.
He was funny.
Yeah.
So what
Marlon liked comedy, but he wasn't really funny. Max was. Max was a devil. He was a devil.
What were the things you noticed about Maximilian Schell that made you like him so much?
Did you work with him?
No.
I would love to see Gilbert Gottfried and Maximilian Schell.
That would have been a good
A remake of The Man in the Glass Booth with you, Gilbert.
He had a great style. I had him do these lines, which he didn't really understand, but he did them so perfectly. He had this one very weird locution, which was when Matthew and Frank Whaley show up at his, laboratory.
Yes, it is a laboratory. The kitchen.
With B.D. Wong,
Right.
where they're raising these animals. And he says, Carmine, meaning Marlon Brando's character, Carmine said, one boy, he had two. It's a very odd thing to say.
Yes.
Then he says it two more times. He kept saying, Carmine said, one boy? He had two. The third time he says it like Carmine, I said, one boy, and he starts laughing like it's the funniest he ever heard. And it just worked. And Frank Wheeler said, you gotta like this guy. He's like a great guy. I ran into Max on a plane like 10 years later. He said, what the hell was that? I never knew what I was saying. What did that mean? I said,
that's great.
Just you did it. It was great.
That's great.
He was very smooth. He was very good.
I also found it interesting, too, that Brando loved Raging Bull, which came up in my research.
He loved De Niro as the fat Raging Bull.
He did.
Yeah, he just loved that.
Yeah. Tell me, too, and this is something I found in the research, too, because you were talking about It's a Gift, which is one of your favorite comedies, and you were talking about showing movies to your grandchildren. And you showed one of your grandchildren City Lights?
I showed I have two grandchildren, one 5, one 2. So I decided to take a shot at City Lights with my 5-year-old, not knowing, And first it comes on, he says, they don't talk? I said, give it a minute. He said, there's no color? I said, give it a minute. And then somebody dumps a bucket of water on Charlie's head, and he starts screaming. That's it. And then the boxing match was just beyond belief. And he was transfixed for an hour and a half. He said that went by so fast. And the blind girl, which is the greatest ending of any movie of all time.
It'll never be topped.
I'm trying to explain to him why I'm blubbering at the end of this movie. But he just got it. He said he just knew there was something there.
That's gratifying. I bring it up because Gilbert exposed his children to black and white movies and classic movies at an early age, to Bride of Frankenstein and The Wolfman and all the Universal stuff.
Well, I did the same with my kids, and it was Night at the Opera, which my younger son would listen to like every morning. I picked up in the Berkshires. We would wake up and I'd hear da 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 da. Stupid scene with the spaghetti.
Yes.
He'd listen 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm listening to that.
Did you show Max the Marxist, Gil, in comedies? I know he's become a student of horror classics.
I mean, I used to quiz him and go, okay, who's Frankenstein? And he'd go, Boris Karloff. And then Dracula.
How old is he?
Now he's 9. But this is when he was like 1 or something.
Oh.
I'd quiz him on.
You haven't showed him Freaks.
I think he may have seen bits and pieces.
He's got to pass puberty before he can... Freaks, the first time I saw Freaks, I was like hid into my bed and I was like 30.
I think
he
depression
did
see it.
Oh, my God.
He did see it and he saw someone and he said, they look like they're from Freaks. That's Freaks is
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Strange.
Talk about a movie that could never, ever be made.
My God, no.
Talk about a risk. Holy Moses. What an amazing
You talk
movie.
about it in the film. I mean, you talk about all the films of that period. You talk about King Kong.
Todd Browning was really something.
Yeah.
As a director.
Yeah.
Because with Freaks, that's another one. Even if nothing creepy is happening, feels creepy.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
You got a lot of people running around on their hands. That's not, that's not like CGI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We want to ask you about working with some great character actors, because you talked before about always giving somebody a piece of business.
Yeah.
And I was telling Andrew outside that this is the only podcast in the world that's discussing James Gleason.
Yes.
and Fritz Feld and Lionel Atwill.
Right.
And Misha Auer. But
how about Douglas Dumbrell?
Douglas Dumbrell.
Oh, yes.
Well, he turns up with the Marx Brothers. He's in
mustache. He's in
the Big Store. He's in one of them.
Day at the Races.
He's in the Day at the Races, right? And Louis Calhern. But these names: Jack Warden, Seymour Cassell, Paul Benedict, Bruno Kirby,
Paul
Fred
Benedict.
Gwynn.
I love Paul Benedict.
Yeah, tell us a story about any of them. Pat Morita, John Cleese, Red Buttons. These are great names.
They are great names. I gravitate to those guys because they have no ego, or if they keep them well disguised, and you pick them because they're so specific, and they do what they know what to do. I mean, Red Buttons is really a talented actor
and terrific.
Yeah,
I didn't.
Terrific.
Yeah, great performance.
Oh.
Small part, but a great performance.
Wonderful.
It could happen to you.
And I always loved that Fritz Feld invented that thing of popping his mouth, slapping his hand to his mouth, making a popping sound, and he built a career on it.
Well, Red Buttons was in It Happened to You, and he played opposite, a contemporary character actor, Richard Jenkins.
Another good one I forgot to mention.
Oh, yes, yes.
Also terrific.
Absolutely great.
Really makes you hate him in that part. And so
but he's great.
Not a lot of screen time.
And he's also very funny.
This is a question from a listener. Why can't or why don't studios make films like It Could Happen to You anymore?
Well, they do, but they don't hire me to direct them, so they're no good. No, they don't. Romantic comedies fell into a particular hole.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot of casting. I mean, they cast the same people in them over and over again. You can't take any kind of chances. And, It Could Happen to You. You had very oddball casting. I mean, Bridget and Nick are not your typical romantic.
Sure, but it works.
But it works because of that fact, because they're not your, and Rosie Perez, they're not your typical triangle.
And in addition to loving character actors, we love films about New York.
Yes.
And that is a film. That's a Valentine to New York.
In New York. And Caleb Deschanel is a genius DP, shot that. And I don't think there's a more beautiful movie shot in New York than that movie.
It's pretty to look at.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Yeah. And a little bit of a departure for you, because I think of you as the absurdist guy who's doing the Komodo dragon, and this is a sentimental.
No, my producing partner said, "I'm going to send you a script. Don't say anything." That's what he always said. Just read it. Don't say anything. And I started reading it, and I said, I like this. I think it's my affinity for movies of the 40s and things. There was something about this.
Jane Anderson was the writer.
Yeah. But everybody was white. So I rewrote the movie entirely. I mean, it couldn't be New York. Everybody was white. It was an all-white movie.
Sure. But also it could have been made in the 40s with Fred MacMurray and Jean Arthur. It's a total throwback.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and so sweet.
I really love
really sentimental.
I really love making that movie.
And he is, Cage is
Nicky's great.
Underrated.
Oh, he's great.
That he can do crazy stuff like Moonstruck and Raising Arizona and What You Put Him Through in Honeymoon in Vegas. Yeah. But I had never seen him play.
This guy.
That I would not think of him.
Jimmy Stewart. I had one direction for him. More Jimmy or less Jimmy, depending on his lines.
Yeah. Terrific movie.
And in Striptease, tell us about Demi Moore getting in shape and naked and everything.
I can't tell you about her getting naked. I mean, she was in great shape. She was a maniac about working out. I mean, I wish she'd been less of a maniac, but it was. She took a huge risk because we couldn't find nobody. I wasn't going to do like a TNT version of Striptease. I really loved the book, and I couldn't have people running around with like two-piece bathing. So you have to be true to that book. And I loved Hyacin, who loved the movie. He said, "That's it. That's what I wrote. Take it or leave it." And she took a big risk, and she got her butt kicked for it. But she did it.
What was working with Reynolds like, Burt Reynolds? Did you have a positive experience? Huh? On Good Days, he was great. We have to ask.
I mean, he's like, in a way, he's like in City Lights, he's like the drunk in City Lights. He's either hugging you to death or he's, who are you? But I worked well with him. I had no problem with him.
Yeah.
He was a Meshuggah of the
Another great cast. What about this Peter Boyle scene in Honeymoon in Vegas? Because it's great. Was he a little bit based on Brando?
No.
Okay.
People always said that, but he wasn't.
Okay.
That was, again, just some perverse thing.
Yeah.
I wanted a Hawaiian captain native who was a musical comedy freak. Which is
just so funny.
And the first person we approached was Raymond Burr.
Oh, tell us about that.
We called up Raymond Burr because I like that kind of, odd kind of stunt casting. I mean, who expects Raymond Burr to show up in a comedy?
Nobody. What happened?
Well, we called him. It was obvious within 10 minutes they had no sense of humor whatsoever. So I don't really sing. I said, well, singing is not like crucial here.
Great in Rear Window.
It was great in Rear Window. Oh my God.
Yeah.
But Peter was fabulous. I love Peter.
Here's another one from a listener, Andrew LaPasha. What is Andrew's favorite memory of working with George Burns?
just being in a room with him. He was first of all, he was so smart. So funny and so smart. And he was really there. It's like some guys you meet them, and the next day you see them, and they say the same thing all over again. It's like they're an animatronic figure from Disney World.
Uh-huh.
He was right there in the moment, whatever you were talking about. And smart
must
about
have had
comedy.
stories.
Oh, it's just the comic intelligence. He said the greatest thing, we were talking about Johnny Carson once. He said, when the show went to an hour, that was the end of the show for me. It never survived going to an hour. That was just another show.
Interesting.
He said all the insanity, all the magic was in an hour and a half because you didn't know, God, they have so much time to fill. What could happen? And that's when the craziness happened.
It's a good point.
Brilliant point.
Yeah.
And he was like that about everything. He was so smart.
He tell you about some of those vaudeville acts? You know about Swain's Rats and Cats? We got a book for you.
He told me about why he smoked cheap cigars.
Why was that?
Because he had this, he said, Milton Berle smokes $20 cigars. I said, if I smoked a $20 cigar, I have to fuck it first, He said, I smoke cheap cigars because they never go out. I can't be lighting a cigar in the middle of a routine. And a cheap cigar, they burn till they fall out of your mouth. Great point.
I got one more question, Andrew, and we get you out of here because I know you got to go someplace.
We'll have to go someplace.
Tell us about the Casablanca remake. And then I'm going to have Gilbert do his Sidney Greenstreet for you. Because I know you'll appreciate it.
Well, I always had a dream to do like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern is Dead with Casablanca, which is you do Casablanca from the point of view of Sam, the piano player. So the movie is about him trying to get his ass out of Casablanca before the Nazis get him. And you get Eddie or Richie Pryor, somebody play that part.
Uh-huh.
And it would have to be Warner Brothers because that's like the crown jewel, which is why, of course, it never happened. But I thought, what a great movie to cast and have all these legendary things happening like in the background. So you get this all-star cast. They each work for like 3 days. You get Nicholson to play.
Yeah.
Bogey, you get Warren and Annette to play, Henry and
Ingrid
Bergman. You get Brando to play Sidney Greenstreet. You get Wally Shawn to play Peter Lorre. It could be so great. But of course, it was just one of those beautiful dreams that never happened.
Did you write a screenplay?
No, God, I'm not that nuts.
Okay.
I knew we could never get
Okay.
it.
What happened with Ottoman Empire, which I asked you about before?
What a great script.
Yeah.
It's, locked away somewhere in my vault of dreams.
What's going to happen to all these trunk scripts? You're going to donate them to a...
I'll give them to you.
Okay. I will read them.
You can bind them and read them.
I will read them with great affection. All right, here's the best Peter Lorre you ever heard. Gilbert, want a favor, Andrew?
No, it was you who bundled it. You, with your stupid attempt to buy it. Kevin found out how valuable it was. No wonder we had such an easy time stealing it. You blundering fathead!
Can he have the Lorre part if you're...
Absolutely. That's fabulous. That and your David Steinberg are really tremendous.
He's a great mimic.
Really.
You remember an actor, John MacGyver?
Of course.
Go ahead, Gil.
My favorite.
Everything must be run according to schedule. We will have no slackers in this organization. We have a tight ship that we're running here, and I am the captain of that ship.
It's so perverse, but absolutely perfect. I mean, who in their right mind would do a John MacGyver? It's so great, though.
Only Gilbert. That's what we do to loosen up the guests. We had Joel Grey in that chair.
Classic.
And we just kept firing them at him. This was like, what were you doing? Sidney Greenstreet? And this was like one after the other. Oh, my God. This was fun.
Yeah, thanks. It was fun for me.
What you want to plug anything? Anything coming up? Are you writing Honeymoon in Vegas the musical? Is that still being performed?
Vegas, the musical hopefully is opening in London next year.
A good experience for you.
Wonderful.
Good.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I love doing it so much.
What about the Eisner Project? Is
It's, we're hat in hand raising money. The movies now, it's so perverse. You get $1.50 from Kuwait. You get $17 from the Rosado brothers. It's
Rosado brothers.
Thing is so
another Godfather
I
reference.
just don't recognize the business. It's like you see a movie, there's like 95 logos before the movie starts. Schmeckel Productions, Schmeckel Brothers Productions. And then finally at some point it says Paramount, but the movie's half over. You have 45 minutes of logos. So sick.
Yeah. Oh, I told you I saw you at Film Forum, and you were also talking about the death of movie theaters, which is something that we talk about a lot.
There's no movie business
It's
anymore.
just heartbreaking.
I mean, that's why Spielberg's going bananas about this Netflix thing. And he's right. The movies, the bigger the screens got at home, movie business is for fallen.
As Lily von Stupp would say.
Yeah,
That's
cottage.
something that saddens us.
It's
Frank
very
and I.
sad,
It's like,
particularly for comedy.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about the in-laws open at the Beekman, and you were
Yeah.
talking about these great old theaters that were.
Yeah.
I mean, we lost the
They
Ziegfeld.
weren't even great, but they were theaters.
They were theaters.
You sit together and laugh.
Yeah.
you'd sit
Sitting- We
lost
together
a lot.
and laugh, or you'd sit together and get scared together, scream.
Absolutely.
Did you go see Blazing Saddles with an audience when Mel trotted it out? Did you go and watch it with a?
You mean now?
Yeah. Recently.
It was actually about 10 years ago we did it at Radio City Music
Yeah.
Hall. Norman and I did it. 3,000 people sitting there, and they went bananas.
It's gonna work 100 years from now in front of an audience.
And because people know it now. It's like, Rigoletto. They know at some point the guy's going to sing this. So they see the cowboys sitting around the fire, and they're laughing even before anything happens.
Yeah.
They know. They just know.
Thanks for doing this. We know you're busy.
Oh, thank
you.
We
you.
wanted you for a long time.
My pleasure.
Our thanks to Norman Steinberg for making this
Norman,
possible.
Wherever you are.
Norman, we love you. Gil, unless you have another impression, unless you want to give him, if you want to give him a little bit of Sidney Greenstreet.
You are a character, sir. I like talking to a man who likes to talk. I distrust the clues mouth man.
What do we do with this?
It's great.
How do we market this?
There must be a way.
A man doing John MacGyver impressions.
See, that's another thing. There used to be out-and-out impressionists.
Oh,
Yes.
I still remember David Fry.
Sure, we talk
yes,
about him all the time.
When David Fry did the on the waterfront scene in the back of the car
Yep.
as Johnson and Humphrey. It was
Yeah.
unbelievable. I could have been a contender. I had some money. I could have been somebody. As Humphrey was so sad.
Yeah. And nobody did a better Nixon.
He
Yeah.
invented
He embodied it. Yeah. We had Will Jordan here
Oh, did
on
you?
this show,
Yeah,
and we had Rich
oh.
Little. We have a fondness for all this old show
the
business.
greatest Ed Sullivan.
Yeah.
was
Oh,
Will
sure.
Jordan.
Yeah.
Oh, and the greatest Kirk Douglas and Burt Lancaster was Frank Gorshin.
Yes, he was very good.
And the best Kirk Douglas was Frank Gorshin.
Yeah.
This guy Caliendo is a pretty good.
He's pretty
impressionist.
good. He's pretty damn
He
good.
does a lot of sports guys.
Yeah, but no
Those
John
show-
MacGyver.
John MacGyver. There's only one person in the universe.
Well, you'd be surprised. Kids
Are the
request
close of
that.
John MacGyver impressionists who get together?
You got a 5-year-old
The young
grandson.
crowd.
Expose him to John MacGyver.
A newsletter of John MacGyver.
The young
impressions.
hip-hop crowd likes John MacGyver.
Since you're in the city, come back and play with us sometime. And
Yes,
we'll
this
just
has
talk
been-
about old movies. We'll just talk about old character actors and your book, and we'll go down to the 30s and through all this stuff.
Thanks, guys.
So, this has been Gilbert Gottfried's amazing Colossal podcast with my co-host Frank Santopadre, and we've been talking to the only man who witnessed Marlon Brando fucking
Now cut
Richard
that
Pryor. the one of the greatest comedy writers and directors, Andrew Bergman.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Andrew.
He wore a shiny